Victor Sullivan adjusted the lapels of his tailored overcoat as he turned the corner, his polished dress shoes clicking softly against the damp pavement. The distant hum of traffic merged with faint echoes of laughter spilling from nearby bars and restaurants. Above him, the city's towering skyline glittered, a reminder of how far he had come. As he approached a dimly lit stretch of sidewalk, something caught his eye. Huddled near a street lamp was a small figure, her thin frame wrapped in a tattered blanket. Beside her sat a little girl, no older than 7, clutching a worn stuffed bear. The child's wide, frightened eyes locked onto Victor's, her gaze cutting through the fog of his thoughts like a blade. He paused, unsure of why he felt compelled to linger. "Spare some change, sir?" The woman's voice trembled, her words almost swallowed by the cold. Victor hesitated. He rarely carried cash, and philanthropy in his world usually came in the form of tax-deductible donations, not impromptu gestures on the street. Yet something about the pair stopped him from walking away. "Wait here," he said, his tone clipped but not unkind. The woman nodded, her wary eyes following him as he disappeared into the warmth of a nearby cafe. Minutes later, Victor returned with a bag of food and 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate. The woman's face softened with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. The girl reached for the cup with both hands, her small fingers trembling from the cold. As she sipped, she let out a soft sigh, her eyes briefly lighting up. Victor crouched to meet the girl's gaze. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily," she said, her voice barely audible. "And your mom?" "Elena," the woman answered, her grip tightening protectively around Lily. The street lamp's dim glow illuminated Elena's gaunt features and the dark circles beneath her eyes. Despite her haggard appearance, there was an undeniable grace about her. Victor's gaze fell to the necklace resting just below her collarbone, a delicate silver chain adorned with an intricately designed pendant. Something about it tugged at a distant memory. "You shouldn't be out here," Victor said, rising to his full height. "It's too cold. Follow me." Elena stiffened. "We're fine. Really, we don't need—" "You'll freeze," Victor interrupted, his tone firm but not harsh. "There's a hotel nearby. At least stay there for the night." Elena hesitated, glancing at Lily, who had already begun to nod off against her side. Exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She finally relented. "Okay." The trio walked in silence, the girl's tiny footsteps echoing alongside Victor's confident strides. When they reached the grand entrance of the hotel, heads turned. Guests in evening attire exchanged curious glances as the disheveled pair stepped into the opulent lobby. Victor approached the concierge. "2 rooms, please," he said, sliding his black card across the counter. The receptionist, momentarily taken aback, quickly composed herself and processed the request. As they rode the elevator to their floor, Victor noticed Elena clutching her necklace tightly, as if it were a talisman warding off unseen threats. Once inside their suite, Lily immediately curled up on the plush bed, fast asleep. Elena, however, remained near the door, her posture tense. "You're safe here," Victor assured her, setting the food he had brought on the table. "Eat something, rest." "Why are you doing this?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't even know us." Victor hesitated. He wasn't entirely sure himself. "Let's just say, I've been where you are," he said simply. As he turned to leave, his eyes landed on the necklace again. The ornate design was unmistakable. His pulse quickened as a fragment of memory surfaced. Could it be? He stopped in his tracks, staring at the pendant with growing unease. "That necklace," he said, his voice low. "Where did you get it?" Elena froze, her hand instinctively covering the pendant. "It was my mother's," she said, her tone guarded. Victor's mind raced. He had seen that necklace before, years ago, in a photograph buried deep within his past. The realization sent a chill down his spine, and as he left the room, a single thought echoed in his mind. Who is she? Victor Sullivan leaned back in the leather armchair of his penthouse suite, staring out at the city skyline, the events of the night replaying in his mind. The enigmatic woman and her daughter had stirred something within him, a blend of curiosity, unease, and an inexplicable need to understand their story. The memory of that necklace, so familiar yet distant, gnawed at him. It wasn't just a trinket. It was a key to a mystery he hadn't realized existed. In the suite next door, Elena sat perched on the edge of the bed, her eyes scanning the luxurious room. The warmth of the space, the softness of the bedding, and the gentle hum of the heater were alien comforts after months of cold nights on the street. Lily, tucked under a plush duvet, slept soundly, her lips curled in the faintest smile. Elena's hand instinctively reached for the necklace, her fingers brushing against its intricate design. The knock on the door startled Elena. She hesitated before opening it, revealing Victor standing there, a tray with tea and sandwiches in hand. "You shouldn't be wandering around here without eating," he said, his tone matter-of-fact as he stepped inside. Elena glanced at him warily, but said nothing as he set the tray on the small table. Victor noticed her guarded expression and softened his demeanor. "I'm not here to interrogate you, Elena," he said gently. "But if I'm going to help you, I need to know what's going on." She crossed her arms, her gaze shifting to Lily. "Why do you care? People like you don't look twice at people like us." Victor paused, her words cutting sharper than he expected. "Maybe I should have looked sooner," he admitted, "but I'm here now. Start wherever you're comfortable." Elena sighed, her shoulders slumping, as though the weight of the world pressed down on her. "It wasn't always like this," she began, her voice tinged with both bitterness and sorrow. 2 years ago, we had a home, a life. My husband, Daniel, was a good man. He worked hard, always provided for us." Her voice faltered, and Victor watched as her fingers clutched the necklace tighter. Then, everything fell apart. Daniel worked for a company, Jonas Miller's company. He got caught in some financial scandal, something about embezzlement. But Daniel wasn't the one stealing. He tried to blow the whistle, and he disappeared. Victor's brow furrowed as he listened. Jonas Miller. The name was a dagger to his chest. It was a name he hadn't spoken in years, but had never forgotten. His old rival, a man as ruthless as he was cunning, had left a trail of destruction in his wake. And now, Jonas's shadow loomed over Elena and Lily. Elena continued, her voice trembling. "After Daniel vanished, they came for me, Jonas's people. They froze our accounts, spread lies, and made sure I couldn't find work. We lost the house. Everything." Victor leaned forward. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I tried," she said bitterly. "They told me there wasn't enough evidence. Jonas has connections everywhere. No one would listen to me. And without money or resources, what could I do?" The room fell silent, except for the soft sound of Lily's breathing. Victor's mind raced. Elena's story, tragic as it was, didn't fully add up. She wasn't telling him everything, and he could see it in the way her eyes darted away when he pressed her for details. "I want to help you," Victor said, after a long pause, "but you need to trust me." Elena shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "Trust is what got my husband killed. I can't take that risk again." Victor sighed, recognizing her fear but unwilling to back down. "What about Lily?" he asked softly. She deserves better than this. Elena's lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. Her gaze shifted to her daughter, who stirred slightly in her sleep. The sight seemed to crumble her resolve. I don't have a choice, do I? She whispered. Victor nodded. No, you don't. As the night wore on, Victor excused himself, leaving Elena and Lily to rest. Back in his suite, he poured himself a glass of scotch, his thoughts a whirlwind. Her story was compelling, yes, but it also raised questions. The necklace, the connection to Jonas Miller, the gaps in her timeline, both it all pointed to something bigger. Picking up his phone, Victor dialed Mark, his trusted assistant. I need you to run a background check, he said curtly. Her name is Elena, late 20s, possibly tied to Jonas Miller's company a few years back. Got it, Mark replied. Anything else? Victor hesitated, staring at the city lights. See if there's any mention of a missing husband. Daniel. Hanging up, Victor sat back and rubbed his temples. He had no idea why he felt so invested in Elena's plight. Perhaps it was the shadow of Jonas Miller, the unresolved history that gnawed at him. Or maybe it was Lily's innocent smile, a reminder of everything he'd once fought to protect. Meanwhile, in the adjacent room, Elena paced back and forth, her nerves fraying. Her fingers brushed over the necklace, as though it held the answers she needed. What was she doing here? Why had she accepted help from a stranger, no matter how kind he seemed? She glanced at Lily, her heart aching. They couldn't afford another betrayal. Yet something about Victor seemed different. His actions, his questions, they didn't align with someone who wanted to use or hurt them. As the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, Elena sat by the window, her resolve hardening. If Victor truly wanted to help, she would let him. But she wouldn't let her guard down. Not yet. At precisely 7 a.m., Victor's phone buzzed. Mark's voice on the other end was sharp and to the point. I've got something, boss. Victor straightened. Go on. Elena's husband, Daniel. He worked for Jonas Miller's firm, all right. But it gets deeper. Oh, he was part of an internal investigation into missing funds, millions of dollars. Then he disappeared. Officially, it's listed as a suicide, but there's no body. And here's the kicker. Your girl, Elena, she's not entirely innocent. There's a report linking her to a transfer of funds just before everything went south. Victor's jaw tightened. Are you saying she's lying? I'm saying you'd better tread carefully, Mark warned. Victor ended the call, his chest tightening. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, and none of them were comforting. As he stared out at the waking city, one thing became clear. This was no simple act of charity. He was entangled in a story far more dangerous than he'd anticipated. Victor frowned. Are you saying Elena's husband was part of that circle? Mark nodded. It's possible. Or he might have been coerced into it. Either way, the connection is undeniable. Victor closed the file, his jaw tightening. Elena's story was growing more complicated by the minute. If Daniel had been part of Jonas's operation, willingly or otherwise, then Elena and Lily could be in far greater danger than they realized. That evening, Victor decided to take a different approach. Instead of questioning Elena further, he invited her and Lily to dinner at a quiet, upscale restaurant. He hoped that a more relaxed setting might encourage her to open up. The meal started awkwardly, with Elena clearly uneasy about the surroundings. Lily, however, was delighted by the fancy table settings and the kind waiter who brought her a special dessert. As they ate, Victor shared stories from his past, including his struggles to rise above poverty and the mentors who had guided him along the way. Elena listened intently, her guarded expression softening. You don't seem like the type to understand hardship, she said after a while. Victor chuckled. Most people assume that. But the truth is, I had my fair share of nights wondering where my next meal would come from. Elena's gaze dropped to her plate. It's not easy, you know. People think being homeless means you're lazy or made bad choices. But sometimes, life just happens. Victor nodded. And sometimes, people like Jonas Miller make it happen. Elena looked up sharply, her eyes narrowing. What do you know about Jonas? Victor met her gaze. More than I'd like to. As the evening wore on, Elena began to open up more about her life. She described the early days of her marriage, the joy of becoming a mother, and the devastating loss of Daniel. Her voice cracked as she recounted the threats, the financial ruin, and the nights spent hiding from Jonas's men. Through it all, Victor listened patiently, his respect for her resilience growing. But he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that she was still holding something back. When they returned to the hotel, Victor escorted them to their suite and bid them good night. But as he turned to leave, Elena called out to him. Victor, she said, her voice hesitant. Thank you. For everything. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Get some rest. We'll figure this out together. Back in his own suite, Victor sat at his desk, staring at the file Mark had compiled. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but there were still too many gaps. Why had Daniel given Elena a necklace tied to Jonas Miller? Was he a victim, or had he been complicit in Jonas's schemes? And most importantly, what role did Elena play in all of this? As Victor pondered these questions, his phone buzzed with a message from Mark. Found something interesting. Jonas is hosting a private event tomorrow night. Might be worth checking out. Victor's eyes narrowed. If Jonas was involved, this was his chance to get closer to the truth. But it also meant taking a risk that could either save Elena and Lily or put them all in even greater danger. Victor Sullivan sat in the quiet stillness of his office, the early morning light, casting long shadows across the room. His mind raced with the revelations from Mark's call. The woman in the next suite, with her haunting story and guarded demeanor, was not who she seemed. The ornate necklace around her neck, a peculiar piece of craftsmanship, held more secrets than he initially suspected. The intricate pendant, shaped like a crescent moon, entwined with vines, was familiar to Victor. He'd seen it once before, many years ago, during a gala hosted by one of the city's most prominent families. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of power, wealth, and connections tied to a network of individuals far removed from the struggles of homelessness. Determined to uncover the truth, Victor opened his laptop and began searching for images of the necklace. He combed through auction house archives, luxury jewelry catalogs, and society event photos. Hours passed, and then, finally, he found it. The necklace was part of a rare collection, crafted by a renowned jeweler, Laurent Devereaux. According to the records, it had been sold 10 years ago to a man named Jonas Miller. Victor's blood ran cold. Jonas Miller again. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of this connection settling over him. Elena's story was becoming increasingly entangled with Jonas's dark web of deceit. But how had the necklace ended up with her? And more importantly, what did it signify? As the morning wore on, Victor decided it was time for answers. He knocked on the door of Elena's suite, and she opened it cautiously, her expression a mix of exhaustion and apprehension. Lily was still asleep, her small frame curled up under the blankets. "We need to talk," Victor said, his tone firm but not unkind. Elena hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. She motioned for him to sit at the small table by the window, while she poured 2 cups of coffee. Victor watched her every move, noting the tension in her shoulders and the way she avoided his gaze. "Elena," he began, "I've been trying to understand your story, and there are pieces that don't add up." Her hands froze mid-pour, and she slowly set the coffee pot down. "What do you mean?" Victor leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "The necklace you're wearing. It belonged to Jonas Miller. How did you get it?" Elena's face paled, and her hand instinctively went to the pendant. "It was a gift," she said quietly. Victor raised an eyebrow. "From whom?" "My husband," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel gave it to me years ago, before everything fell apart. He said it was a token of our love." Victor studied her reaction, searching for any sign of deceit. "Did he tell you where he got it?" Elena shook her head. I didn't ask. I didn't care. All that mattered was that it was from him." Victor leaned back, his mind whirring. Was she truly unaware of the necklace's significance, or was she hiding something? Later that day, Victor met with Mark in his private office. His assistant, always sharp and thorough, had gathered additional information. "The necklace is one of a kind," Mark began, handing Victor a file. "It's part of a collection that Jonas Miller used to flaunt his wealth. But here's the interesting part. There are rumors that it was used as a marker for members of his inner circle, people who worked closely with him." Victor Sullivan leaned against the window of his suite, watching the city lights flicker like restless stars. Despite the late hour, his mind refused to rest. The revelations of the day weighed heavily on him, and the puzzle of Elena's connection to Jonas Miller gnawed at his thoughts. He knew he was wading into dangerous waters, but walking away wasn't an option. Not anymore. As Victor stared into the night, his mind drifted to his past. He remembered the small apartment where he grew up, cramped, but filled with his mother's unwavering love. She had worked tirelessly to provide for him, often juggling 2 jobs just to make ends meet. Despite their struggles, she always found time to instill in him a sense of empathy and the importance of helping others. Her words echoed in his mind now. "Victor, when you have the power to change someone's life, even just a little, you do it. No questions asked." It was a lesson he had carried with him into adulthood, one that guided his decision to help Elena and Lily. Yet the deeper he delved into their situation, the more he realized that helping them wasn't just an act of kindness. It was becoming personal. The next morning, Victor invited Elena to join him for breakfast in the hotel's private dining room. She hesitated but eventually agreed, bringing Lily along. The little girl's eyes lit up at the sight of the lavish buffet, and Victor couldn't help but smile as she eagerly filled her plate. As they ate, Victor gently prodded Elena for more details about her past. She recounted her early years with Daniel, describing him as a loving husband and devoted father. But her voice faltered as she spoke of the day everything fell apart. "Daniel worked for a man named Jonas Miller," she began, her hands trembling slightly as she held her coffee cup. "He was supposed to be managing investments, but things went wrong. Money disappeared, and Jonas blamed Daniel." Victor's expression hardened. "Did Daniel steal the money?" Elena shook her head vehemently. He was framed. Jonas set him up to take the fall. When the accusations started, Daniel tried to fight back, but Jonas was too powerful. He had connections everywhere, lawyers, politicians, even law enforcement. Her voice broke as she continued. "One night, Daniel told me we needed to leave. He said Jonas was coming after us, that he'd made threats against me and Lily. We packed our things, but Daniel never made it home that night. The police said it was an accident, but I know it wasn't." Victor listened intently, his mind racing. The pieces were beginning to align. But the picture they painted was dark and dangerous. Determined to learn more about Jonas, Victor called his private investigator, Laura Bennett. Laura was a no-nonsense professional with a knack for uncovering secrets, and Victor trusted her implicitly. "Ah, Jonas Miller," Victor said when she answered. "I need everything you can find on him. His business dealings, his associates, his enemies. Leave no stone unturned." Laura chuckled dryly. "Jonas Miller, you sure know how to pick your battles, Sullivan. He's bad news." "I don't care," Victor replied firmly. "I need to know what I'm up against." Laura promised to get back to him within 24 hours, but Victor knew even that short amount of time could be dangerous. Jonas's name alone was enough to send chills down his spine, and if he was as ruthless as Elena described, then they were all in serious trouble. That evening, Victor received an unexpected call from Mark. His assistant sounded unusually tense. "Victor," Mark began, "I found something you need to see. It's about Jonas and Elena." Victor's stomach tightened. "What is it?" Mark hesitated. "There's a name that keeps coming up in connection to Jonas's operations, Daniel Harper. According to the records, he was Jonas's right-hand man for several years. He handled investments, real estate deals, and other less legal activities." Victor's grip on the phone tightened. "Are you saying Elena's husband was complicit?" "It's hard to say," Mark replied. "There's evidence that he tried to distance himself from Jonas's dealings, but, well, you know how these things go. Jonas doesn't let people walk away." Victor's mind raced as he processed the information. If Daniel had been involved with Jonas, even reluctantly, then Elena's story was far more complicated than she had let on. But one thing was clear: Jonas wouldn't hesitate to come after her if he believed she knew too much. The following day, Victor received a message from Laura. She had tracked down one of Jonas's former associates, a man named Samuel Grant, who had turned informant years ago in exchange for leniency. Samuel now lived in a secluded cabin outside the city, far from Jonas's reach. Victor decided to visit Samuel, hoping to uncover more about Jonas and his connection to Daniel. Laura accompanied him, her presence a reassuring reminder that he wasn't facing this battle alone. Samuel was a wiry man in his 60s, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through Victor. As they sat in the dimly lit cabin, Samuel recounted his time working for Jonas. "Jonas is a snake," Samuel said bluntly. "He uses people, chews them up, and spits them out. Daniel Harper was one of the good ones, too good for this world. He tried to do the right thing, but Jonas doesn't take kindly to disobedience." Victor leaned forward. "What happened to him?" Samuel's expression darkened. "Jonas had him killed. Made it look like an accident. Classic Jonas move." Victor's heart sank. Elena's suspicions had been correct, and the danger she faced was very real. He thanked Samuel for his time and promised to stay in touch, but as they left the cabin, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That night, Victor returned to the hotel to find a note slipped under his door. The message was simple but chilling. "Stay out of this, Sullivan. This isn't your fight." Victor's jaw tightened as he crumpled the note in his hand. He knew Jonas was trying to intimidate him, but he refused to back down. Elena and Lily needed him, and he wasn't about to let them face this battle alone. He called Laura and Mark, instructing them to tighten security and prepare for the possibility of retaliation. The stakes were higher than ever, but Victor was determined to see this through, no matter the cost. The tension in Victor's penthouse was palpable as he paced the length of the room. Laura sat at the marble counter, sorting through files on Jonas Miller, while Mark worked silently at his laptop. The pieces were falling into place, but every discovery only added to the gravity of the situation. Victor turned to face them. "Jonas knows we're digging." That note wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration of war. Laura raised an eyebrow. "Then we'd better be ready for battle." As the team delved deeper into Jonas's operations, it became evident just how extensive his reach was. He wasn't just a corrupt businessman. He controlled a shadowy empire built on fear and exploitation. From money laundering to human trafficking, Jonas's fingerprints were everywhere. Victor couldn't shake the image of Jonas targeting Elena and Lily. Their vulnerability made him furious, and he vowed to protect them at all costs. Meanwhile, Jonas was fully aware of Victor's involvement. His informants within the city kept him updated, and he was already devising a plan to neutralize the threat. Victor arranged for Elena and Lily to stay in a safe house under round-the-clock protection. Despite her initial resistance, Elena agreed, realizing the danger was too great to ignore. The safe house, an inconspicuous brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, was equipped with the latest security systems and manned by trustworthy guards. Lily, ever the optimist, seemed to adapt quickly. She spent her days drawing pictures of the family she hoped to have one day. A father, a mother, and a protector she had labeled Mr. Victor. Elena, on the other hand, struggled with guilt. "I never wanted this," she confided in Victor during one of his visits. "I didn't want to drag anyone into my mess." Victor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You didn't drag me into anything. I'm here because I want to be." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the weight of their predicament seemed to lighten. Despite the precautions, it wasn't long before Jonas's men began sniffing around. A dark SUV was spotted, idling near the safe house, and a delivery man turned out to be an imposter, trying to get inside. Victor immediately tightened security. He brought in additional guards and installed cameras around the perimeter. But the escalating threats only made it clear that Jonas was growing impatient. Laura Bennett, the private investigator, proved invaluable. Her network of contacts and keen instincts helped the team stay one step ahead. She tracked Jonas's movements and intercepted one of his messages, revealing that he was planning a significant move. "We've got to act fast," Laura warned. "Jonas isn't going to sit back and let us dismantle his operation." Victor nodded. "What do you suggest?" "We hit him where it hurts," Laura replied. "Expose his network, freeze his assets, and turn his allies against him." Victor liked the sound of that. "Let's do it." As the team worked tirelessly, the pressure began to take its toll. Victor's temper flared more easily, and even Laura, usually unshakable, seemed on edge. The safe house became a fortress, but the sense of danger was inescapable. One night, Victor received a call from Mark, his assistant. "I found something," Mark said, his voice tense. "Jonas has a storage facility on the outskirts of the city. It's heavily guarded, but it could be where he's keeping sensitive records." Victor's instincts kicked in. "Let's check it out." Victor and Laura devised a plan to infiltrate the storage facility. They knew it was risky, but it was their best chance at uncovering the full extent of Jonas's operations. With Mark providing remote support, they set out under the cover of darkness. The facility was a sprawling compound, surrounded by high fences and patrolled by armed guards. Laura managed to disable the security cameras, giving them a narrow window of opportunity. Inside, they found rows of metal containers, each one locked and labeled with cryptic codes. Laura picked a lock on the nearest container, revealing a stash of documents, cash, and fake passports. "This is it," she whispered. "Proof of everything." Their success was short-lived. As they loaded the evidence into a duffel bag, the sound of approaching footsteps sent their hearts racing. Laura gestured for Victor to hide, but it was too late. A flashlight beam illuminated them, and a gruff voice barked, "Hey, who's there?" Victor's mind raced. He had no choice but to act. Using a metal rod he'd found, he struck the guard from behind, knocking him unconscious. But the commotion had drawn attention, and more guards were closing in. "Run!" Laura hissed, grabbing the duffel bag. They sprinted toward the exit, dodging bullets as they went. By the time they reached the car, adrenaline was pumping through their veins. Back at the safe house, Victor and Laura combed through the documents they had retrieved. What they found was chilling. Detailed records of Jonas's dealings, including payments to corrupt officials and a list of people he had silenced. One name stood out: Daniel Harper. "Elena's husband," Victor murmured. "Jonas had him killed." The revelation left Victor seething. He knew Jonas had to be stopped, not just for Elena and Lily's sake, but for everyone who had suffered because of him. As Victor and Laura planned their next move, a knock at the door startled them. One of the guards entered, his face pale. "Mr. Sullivan," he said, "we have a problem." He handed Victor a tablet, showing footage from the safe house's surveillance cameras. A man in a hooded jacket was seen lurking outside, holding a photograph of Elena and Lily. Victor's blood ran cold. Jonas was sending a message: "I know where they are." The battle had only just begun. The air in the safe house was thick with unease. Victor stared at the grainy footage of the hooded figure outside, his jaw clenched. The stakes had risen higher than he had anticipated. Jonas wasn't just taunting him. He was issuing a challenge. Elena sat silently in the living room, holding Lily close, as the little girl dozed off on her lap. Victor approached, his expression a mixture of determination and concern. "Elena, I need you to trust me," he said softly. "We're going to get through this, but I need to know everything you haven't told me yet." Elena hesitated, her eyes darting toward Lily. "It's not that I don't trust you. It's just the truth might put you in more danger." Victor knelt down to meet her gaze. "I'm already in this, Elena. There's no turning back now." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Okay, I'll tell you everything." Later that night, Elena recounted her life with Daniel Harper, her late husband. She revealed how Daniel had been coerced into working for Jonas, under the threat of harm to his family. When Daniel tried to escape the criminal web, he disappeared, leaving Elena and Lily vulnerable. "I thought if I kept moving, Jonas would lose interest," Elena admitted. "But he never did. He's like a predator. Once he locks onto you, he doesn't let go." Victor listened intently, his resolve hardening with every word. "Then we'll make sure he never has the chance to hurt you or Lily again." In the meantime, Laura had been poring over the documents recovered from the storage facility. Among them was a set of blueprints for a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a location not listed in any of Jonas's official records. "This could be where he's hiding something big," Laura told Victor. "Maybe even the leverage he's using to keep his network in check." Victor glanced at the blueprints, his mind racing. "We'll need to move fast. If Jonas finds out we're onto him, he'll clear it out." Victor called a late-night meeting with his team. "We're going to hit this warehouse," he announced. "If it's as important as Laura thinks, it could be the key to taking Jonas down." Mark, his assistant, raised a cautious hand. "Do we have the manpower for this? Jonas isn't going to leave a place like that unguarded." Laura smirked. "That's where our new ally comes in." The room fell silent as Laura introduced Detective Sam Torres, a grizzled but sharp-witted officer who had spent years trying to build a case against Jonas. Sam had recently been suspended for excessive zeal in his pursuit of justice, an accusation that reeked of corruption within the department. "I've got nothing to lose," Sam said, his gravelly voice cutting through the tension. And I want to see Jonas rot as much as you do. The team spent the next 48 hours preparing for the operation. Sam secured tactical gear and additional intel on the warehouse, while Mark worked with Laura to disable Jonas's digital surveillance systems. Elena insisted on helping, despite Victor's protests. "You can't keep me on the sidelines," she argued. "This is my fight too." Victor reluctantly agreed, assigning her the task of monitoring communications during the raid. It was a small role, but it gave her a sense of control and hope. Under the cover of darkness, the team approached the warehouse. Sam and Laura led the charge, while Victor stayed close behind, his heart pounding in his chest. The warehouse was eerily quiet, but the tension was electric. As they breached the main entrance, they were met with resistance. Jonas's men opened fire, forcing the team to take cover. Sam barked orders, his experience in law enforcement proving invaluable. "Stay focused," Laura shouted. "We're almost there." Victor spotted a locked office at the back of the warehouse and made a beeline for it. Inside, he found stacks of ledgers, hard drives, and, most chillingly, a list of names. "These are his targets," Victor murmured, his stomach churning. "Families, businesses, even politicians. He has leverage on everyone." Just as Victor began loading the evidence into a bag, a guard stormed into the office. Victor barely had time to react, using a nearby chair to knock the man off balance. The commotion drew more guards, and soon the entire warehouse was a war zone. Sam and Laura held their ground, covering Victor as he made his escape. Elena's voice crackled over the radio. "Victor, are you okay?" "I'm fine," he replied, his breath labored. "But we need to get out of here, now." The team managed to fight their way out of the warehouse, but not without injuries. Sam took a bullet to the shoulder, and Laura had a deep gash on her arm. Victor, though shaken, was unharmed. As they regrouped at the safe house, the weight of their actions sank in. They had struck a blow against Jonas, but it was clear the fight was far from over. Seeing Victor's determination and bravery sparked something in Elena. She realized that she couldn't let fear control her any longer. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. "You've done so much for us," she told Victor. "It's time I started fighting for myself and for Lily." Victor smiled. "That's the spirit." The victory was short-lived. The next morning, a package arrived at the safe house. Inside was a photograph of Lily, taken through the window of her room. Attached was a note. "You think you've won. This is just the beginning." Victor's hands trembled as he crumpled the note. Jonas had just made it personal. The air in the safe house was taut with fear and determination. The photograph of Lily, captured so vulnerably, was a clear message. Jonas wasn't just playing games anymore. He was out for blood. Victor's fists clenched as he stared at the chilling image. "We can't sit and wait for him to strike," he declared. "It's time we take the fight to Jonas." The team gathered around the table, in the safe house's dimly lit living room, their expressions grim but resolute. Sam, his arm in a sling from the raid, placed a newly marked city map in the center. "This," Sam said, pointing to a red circle on the map, "is where Jonas is most likely hiding his main operations. An upscale office building under a shell company's name. High security, minimal public access." Victor studied the map, his mind racing. "That's where we'll hit next." Laura leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "This isn't just some warehouse. Jonas will be expecting us." Victor's jaw tightened. "We've already risked everything. I'm not letting him make good on that threat." Sam laid out the details. The building's lower floors were leased to legitimate businesses, but the top floor was heavily fortified, with surveillance systems, guards, and private elevators. This isn't just about breaking in, Laura said, scanning the plans. We'll need to neutralize his tech systems first. Victor turned to Elena, who had been sitting quietly on the edge of the room. We'll need your help. Elena's eyes widened. Me? You've been in Jonas's world. You know how he operates. If we're going to outsmart him, we need your insight. She hesitated but nodded. I'll do whatever it takes. The team spent hours preparing. Laura worked with Mark to develop a plan to bypass Jonas's surveillance, while Sam coordinated with a few trusted law enforcement contacts for backup. Elena shared everything she knew about Jonas's patterns, from his choice of henchmen to his obsession with control. By midnight, they were ready. Under the cover of darkness, the team approached the building in 2 unmarked vehicles. Victor's heart pounded as he scanned the streets for any sign of Jonas's men. The city felt unnaturally quiet, as if holding its breath for what was to come. Sam and Laura entered first, posing as late-night delivery personnel. Their forged credentials got them past the initial security checkpoint. Victor and Elena followed close behind, slipping through a side entrance that Laura had hacked to unlock remotely. As they ascended the service stairwell, the tension was palpable. Victor kept his hand on the concealed earpiece Laura had given him, listening to her whispered updates. We're in the server room. Laura's voice crackled. Disabling cameras now. But just as they reached the top floor, Victor heard the faint sound of footsteps echoing in the stairwell below. He turned to Elena, motioning for silence. The door to the stairwell burst open, and 2 guards stormed in. Victor lunged forward, using the element of surprise to knock one guard unconscious. Elena, despite her fear, grabbed a fire extinguisher and swung it at the second guard, disorienting him long enough for Victor to take him down. Elena's hands trembled as she set the extinguisher down. Is this what you do every day? Victor smirked. Not exactly. You're a natural, though. As they entered Jonas's private office, they were met with an unsettling sight. A room filled with surveillance monitors, displaying live feeds from across the city. Victor's stomach churned as he spotted one screen showing Lily's school playground. He's been watching us this whole time, Elena whispered, her voice shaking. Before Victor could respond, a booming voice echoed through the room. Welcome, Victor, Jonas said, stepping out from the shadows. I've been expecting you. Jonas's men quickly surrounded them, their weapons drawn. Victor's mind raced, searching for a way out. But Jonas was one step ahead. You're predictable, Sullivan, Jonas sneered. Always playing the hero. But heroes don't win in the real world. Just as Jonas's men moved to restrain them, a deafening explosion rocked the building. Smoke filled the air, and Victor seized the moment to act. He and Elena fought their way through the chaos, using the cover of the smoke to slip away. Downstairs, Sam and Laura had orchestrated the explosion to create a diversion. They met Victor and Elena in the stairwell, their faces streaked with soot, but triumphant. Got what we came for, Laura said, holding up a hard drive she had retrieved from the server room. The team exited the building as sirens wailed in the distance. Jonas's men were in disarray, scrambling to contain the fire and secure their boss. Victor felt a grim satisfaction, knowing they had struck a major blow. Back at the safe house, Laura plugged the hard drive into her laptop. The data they uncovered was staggering. Financial records, blackmail material, and evidence of Jonas's connections to powerful figures across the city. This is it, Victor said, his voice heavy with determination. This is how we bring him down. In the aftermath, Elena's demeanor shifted. The fear that had once defined her was replaced with a quiet strength. I can't keep running, she told Victor. I want to fight back. For Lily, for Daniel, for everyone Jonas has hurt. Victor nodded, pride evident in his expression. You're not alone in this. But their victory was short-lived. That evening, a news report aired, revealing that Jonas had publicly accused Victor of corporate espionage and criminal activity. He's trying to turn the tables, Mark said, his voice filled with alarm. If we don't act fast, he'll ruin you. Victor's eyes narrowed as he stared at the screen. Let him try. He's underestimated us for the last time. The safe house was quieter than usual, the tension palpable, as Victor, Elena, and the team pored over the data extracted from Jonas's servers. The glow of Laura's laptop screen reflected the grim determination etched on everyone's faces. Every file they opened unraveled more of Jonas's twisted empire. But it wasn't until Laura stumbled upon a folder titled Legacy that the true gravity of their situation became clear. As Laura clicked on the folder, a series of scanned documents and photographs filled the screen. Victor leaned in, his brow furrowed. One image caught his eye immediately. A younger Elena, standing beside a man in an expensive suit. Victor's heart skipped a beat. That's Jonas, he whispered, his voice laced with disbelief. Elena's face drained of color. That's impossible. I've never. Her voice faltered as she stared at the image. Memories buried deep began to surface. That was Daniel's boss. My husband used to work for him. Victor exchanged a glance with Laura, who began pulling up more files. It became clear. Daniel, Elena's late husband, had been deeply entangled in Jonas's operations. Bank statements revealed large, unexplained transactions under Daniel's name. Emails hinted at coercion, and a chilling document detailed Daniel's alleged role in laundering money for Jonas. Elena slumped into a chair, her hands trembling. He never told me any of this, she murmured, tears welling up. He always said the extra money was from bonuses. He was trying to give Lily a better life. Victor knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Elena, this doesn't mean he was guilty. Jonas has a way of pulling people into his web, whether they like it or not. But why didn't he tell me? She cried. Why did he keep me in the dark? Laura interjected, her tone measured. Jonas likely threatened him. It's how he operates. He finds people's vulnerabilities and exploits them. Elena wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. If Daniel was caught up in this, it wasn't by choice. He was a good man. Later that night, Victor found himself alone on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. Memories of his mother flooded his mind. She had always been a fighter, working multiple jobs to ensure Victor had a chance at a better life. Her sacrifices were the foundation of his success, and now, here he was, standing in the middle of a battle not unlike hers, fighting for someone else's chance at a better future. Elena joined him, her presence quiet but grounding. Thank you, she said softly, for believing in me. In Daniel. Victor turned to her, his expression sincere. I've seen enough of Jonas's work to know that good people often get caught in his crosshairs. Daniel was one of them, and so are you. The moment of quiet reflection was interrupted by the sharp ring of Victor's phone. He answered, his expression hardening, as Jonas's voice came through the line. Enjoying the files, Sullivan? Jonas drawled, his tone dripping with malice. You're digging into things you shouldn't. I'd hate for anything to happen to that pretty little family you're playing house with. Victor's grip tightened on the phone. If you so much as look at them, I'll make sure you rot in prison for the rest of your life. Jonas laughed. Oh, Victor, this isn't a game you can win. Walk away while you still can. Victor hung up, his jaw clenched. He knows we're getting close, he told Elena, but we're not backing down. The next morning, the team gathered to discuss their next move. Laura had spent the night analyzing the files and had uncovered a list of high-profile names linked to Jonas's operations, politicians, CEOs, even law enforcement officials. This isn't just about Jonas, Laura explained. He's part of a much larger network. If we're going to take him down, we need to expose everyone involved. Victor nodded. Then we need to hit him where it hurts the most, his reputation. If we can make this public, he won't be able to hide behind his money or connections. Sam, ever the realist, chimed in. That's easier said than done. These people have resources, and they won't go down without a fight. Amid the planning, Elena made a surprising announcement. I want to go public with my story, she said, her voice steady. If I can show people what Jonas did to my family, maybe others will come forward too. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed her words. Victor was the first to respond. Are you sure? Once your story is out there, there's no going back. Elena nodded. I'm tired of being scared. It's time to fight back. Her resolve inspired the team, and they began brainstorming how to use her story as part of their plan. That evening, as the team finalized their strategy, Laura received an alert on her laptop. A breaking news story was airing, featuring Jonas at a lavish charity gala. To everyone's shock, Jonas was holding a press conference, accusing Victor of orchestrating a smear campaign against him. Victor Sue. Victor's penthouse buzzed with energy as the team prepared for their most ambitious plan yet. The goal was clear: lure Jonas into exposing himself and his network at the upcoming charity auction, a high-profile event that promised a media frenzy. Every move had to be calculated, every detail flawless, as the stakes had never been higher. The night before the event, Laura laid out the strategy on a digital board. The auction is Jonas's playground, she began, pointing to a layout of the venue. It's the perfect place for him to flaunt his power and wealth. We'll use that against him. Victor nodded, his expression steely. We need to make sure this isn't just about him. If we exposed his entire network, we cut off his lifeline. The plan hinged on planting incriminating evidence in Jonas's private suite at the venue. Victor and Laura would infiltrate the suite during the auction, while Sam and Elena would distract Jonas and his associates. Meanwhile, Mark's betrayal had left a gaping hole in their team, but Victor refused to let it deter them. Jonas thrives on fear and intimidation, Victor said. It's time we turn the tables. The day of the auction arrived with an air of anticipation. Elena, wearing a modest but elegant dress provided by Victor, blended seamlessly with the elite crowd. Her demeanor was poised, but her hands trembled slightly as she clutched Lily's drawing tucked safely in her purse, a reminder of why she was here. Victor, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, exuded confidence as he navigated the room. His presence drew attention, whispers rippling through the crowd. Jonas noticed him almost immediately, his eyes narrowing as he approached. Well, well, Sullivan, Jonas said, his voice dripping with mockery. Didn't expect to see you here? Victor smiled coolly. I wouldn't miss it. After all, you always put on quite a show. As Jonas chuckled, clearly enjoying the verbal sparring, Elena stepped forward, drawing his attention. And who is this lovely lady? Jonas asked, his gaze lingering on her. Before Victor could respond, Elena spoke, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. Just someone here to admire the art. Jonas's smile faltered for a split second, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Victor noticed it immediately. While Elena kept Jonas occupied, Laura and Victor slipped away to the private suite. They had mere minutes to execute their plan. Laura expertly bypassed the security system, and the door clicked open. Inside, they found a treasure trove of evidence, ledgers, encrypted devices, and even physical cash stashed in hidden compartments. Victor snapped photos, while Laura copied files onto a portable drive. It was a treasure trove of incriminating material. Just as they were finishing, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. Laura's eyes widened. "We have to move. Now." They barely made it out of the suite before Jonas's men entered, their faces suspicious. Victor and Laura blended back into the crowd, their hearts pounding, but their mission accomplished. Meanwhile, Jonas had grown increasingly wary of Elena. "You seem familiar," he said, his tone laced with suspicion. "Have we met before?" Elena maintained her composure. "I don't believe so. Perhaps you've mistaken me for someone else." Jonas's smile was cold. "Perhaps." As he turned away, Elena's relief was short-lived. One of Jonas's men leaned in to whisper something in his ear, and Jonas's expression darkened. He signaled to his security team, and the atmosphere in the room shifted. Victor noticed immediately and moved to Elena's side. "We need to leave," he whispered. Before they could slip away, Jonas grabbed a microphone and called for everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice commanding the room. "Before we continue, I'd like to address some unfounded rumors that have been circulating." Victor's jaw clenched. He knew what was coming. "Victor Sue." Jonas gestured toward Victor and Elena. "It seems we have some uninvited guests tonight. People who are intent on tarnishing my reputation with baseless accusations." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as cameras turned toward Victor. Jonas smirked, reveling in the attention. "Mr. Sullivan, care to explain why you're here?" Victor stepped forward, his calm demeanor masking the storm brewing inside. "I'm here for the same reason as everyone else, to expose the truth." The room fell silent as Victor's words hung in the air. Jonas's smug expression faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Truth?" he scoffed. "What truth? That you've been harassing an innocent businessman out of some misguided vendetta?" Victor took a deep breath, ready to counter, when a commotion erupted at the back of the room. Two of Jonas's men were dragging Elena forward, her protest drowned out by the noise. "Let her go," Victor demanded, stepping toward them. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Jonas's men held Elena in place. Jonas turned to her, his expression venomous. "You should have stayed in the shadows where you belong," he sneered. "Now, everyone will see you for who you really are." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph, the same one Victor had seen in the files. He held it up for everyone to see. "This woman is the wife of a known criminal, someone who betrayed me and paid the ultimate price." Elena's face turned pale, but she stood her ground. "You're the criminal, Jonas," she said, her voice shaking but defiant. "You destroy lives and hide behind your wealth. Well, not anymore." The tension in the room reached its peak as Jonas laughed coldly. "Bold words, but they won't save you." Before anyone could react, the lights suddenly cut out, plunging the room into darkness. Chaos erupted as guests screamed and security scrambled. In the confusion, Victor grabbed Elena's hand and pulled her toward the exit. As they reached the door, a voice echoed through the darkness, chilling in its calmness. "You can run, Sullivan, but you can't hide. This isn't over." Victor didn't stop, his mind racing as he led Elena to safety. The trap had been set, but Jonas had turned the tables, leaving Victor and his team with more questions than answers, and the looming threat of what Jonas would do next. The weight of the evening hung heavily in Victor's chest as they returned to the penthouse. The revelation that Jonas had been prepared for their plan shook the team to its core. Elena sat quietly on the couch, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a cup of tea. Lily had fallen asleep in a guest room, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding around her. Victor gathered the team in the living room. Laura, still fuming, slammed a folder onto the coffee table. He knew, Victor. Jonas knew everything about our plan, down to the last detail. Victor ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. It's impossible. We've been meticulous. No leaks, no communication outside this room. Except there was a leak, Laura countered, her tone sharp. And we need to find out who. Elena, still shaken from the night's events, looked up. It's my fault, isn't it? He recognized me. He used me to gain the upper hand. Victor shook his head. No, Elena. This isn't on you. Someone in our circle betrayed us. Hours passed as Laura sifted through encrypted messages and security logs. The tension was palpable, each member of the team casting wary glances at the others. Finally, Laura's voice broke the silence. Got it, she did, her face grim. Mark. Victor's heart sank. Mark, are you sure? Laura nodded, pulling up a series of emails on her laptop. He's been feeding Jonas information for weeks. Every move we've made, every plan we've discussed, it all went straight to him. Anger flared in Victor's chest. Mark had been his right-hand man for years, someone he trusted implicitly. The betrayal cut deep. Where is he now? Victor asked, his voice cold. Laura's fingers flew across the keyboard. Last ping on his phone was at a warehouse downtown. It's owned by one of Jonas's shell companies. Victor clenched his fists. We're going after him. The warehouse was eerily quiet as Victor, Laura, and Elena approached. Armed with nothing but flashlights and their wits, they crept through the darkened building. The air was thick with tension, every creak of the floorboards sending shivers down their spines. They found Mark in a dimly lit office at the back of the warehouse, seated at a desk, with a resigned expression on his face. He didn't look surprised to see them. You're here sooner than I expected, Mark said, leaning back in his chair. Victor's voice was ice. Why, Mark? After everything we've been through, why would you betray me? Mark sighed, running a hand over his face. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Victor. Jonas promised me a way out. He said he'd clear my debts, protect my family. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Victor snapped, and you made the wrong one. Before Mark could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Jonas's men had arrived, their weapons glinting in the faint light. The team had walked straight into a trap. Drop your weapons, one of the men barked, aiming his gun at Victor. Victor raised his hands slowly, his mind racing for a way out. Laura followed suit, her eyes darting around the room for anything she could use as a weapon. Elena stood frozen, her face pale. Jonas entered the room moments later, his smile as smug as ever. Victor Sullivan, he drawled. Always the hero, aren't you? But heroes rarely survive in my world. Victor stared him down. This isn't over, Jonas. You're going to pay for everything you've done. Jonas chuckled, clearly amused. Bold words for a man with no cards left to play. He turned to Mark. You did well, Mark, but your usefulness has come to an end. Mark's eyes widened in panic. Wait, Jonas, we had a deal. Jonas smirked. Deals are for people who can still deliver. You're just a liability now. Before anyone could react, Jonas's men dragged Mark out of the room. His screams echoed through the warehouse, sending chills down their spines. The team was left alone in the office, their hands tied behind their backs. Victor felt the weight of his failure pressing down on him. Mark's betrayal had not only jeopardized their mission, but also endangered the lives of everyone he cared about. Elena broke the silence, her voice trembling. "We can't let Jonas win, Victor. He'll destroy everything." Victor looked at her, his resolve hardening. "He won't. I promise you. We'll find a way." Just then, Laura managed to slip her bindings using a concealed knife. She quickly freed Victor and Elena, and the three of them began searching for a way out. The sound of approaching footsteps spurred them into action, adrenaline coursing through their veins. As they navigated the maze-like warehouse, Victor stumbled upon a hidden room filled with documents and files. Among them was a folder labeled Project Phoenix. Inside were blueprints, transaction records, and names, powerful names tied to Jonas's operation. Before they could process the significance of their discovery, a voice rang out behind them. "Going somewhere?" They turned to see Jonas standing in the doorway, a gun in his hand, and a triumphant smirk on his face. The air was thick with tension as Jonas stood in the doorway, his gun trained on Victor and the team. For a moment, no one moved. The dim light of the warehouse flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Jonas smirked, his confidence radiating as he gestured with the gun. "You know, Victor, I almost admire your persistence. Almost. But this little game of yours ends here." Victor took a small step forward, his hands raised in mock surrender. "Jonas, let's be reasonable. You're a businessman, right? Killing us won't solve your problems. It'll only create more." Jonas tilted his head, amused. "Oh, Victor, you think this is about solving problems? This is about sending a message." Before Jonas could pull the trigger, Laura acted. With lightning speed, she threw a small object, a smoke grenade she'd concealed earlier, onto the floor. The room erupted in a cloud of thick, choking smoke, obscuring everyone's visions. "Run!" Laura shouted, grabbing Elena and pulling her toward the exit. The smoke provided cover, but it also disoriented the team. Victor stumbled through the maze of crates and equipment, his ears straining to catch any sound over the chaos. Gunshots rang out, echoing through the warehouse, as Jonas's men fired blindly into the smoke. "Elena! Laura!" Victor called out, his voice hoarse. "I'm here." Elena's voice came from somewhere ahead. Victor followed the sound, finding her crouched behind a stack of crates. Lily clung to her mother, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to get out of here," Victor said, his tone urgent. "Where's Laura?" Elena asked. Victor scanned the area, but the smoke made it impossible to see. "She'll find us. Right now we need to move." Victor led the way, weaving through the maze-like warehouse, with Elena and Lily close behind. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, and Victor knew they were running out of time. Spotting a service door ahead, he motioned for them to follow. As they reached the door, a figure emerged from the smoke. It was one of Jonas's men. He raised his weapon, but Victor was faster. Grabbing a nearby metal pipe, Victor swung it with all his strength, knocking the man unconscious. "Go!" Victor urged, pushing the door open. They spilled out into the cold night air, the sharp wind stinging their faces. The trio barely had time to catch their breath before the roar of engines shattered the silence. Jonas's men had jumped into SUVs and were now chasing them through the industrial district. Victor scanned the area, his mind racing. Spotting an abandoned delivery truck, he led Elena and Lily toward it. "Get in!" he shouted, climbing into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, and Victor slammed his foot on the gas. The truck lurched forward, barreling down the empty streets as their pursuers closed in. Bullets pinged off the metal frame, each shot sending shivers down Elena's spine as she clutched Lily tightly. Meanwhile, back at the warehouse, Laura was still fighting her way out. Using her training, She took down several of Jonas's men with precision strikes, her movements fluid and calculated. Spotting an opening, she slipped through a side door and into the night. She spotted the delivery truck speeding away, followed closely by Jonas's SUVs. Without hesitation, Laura commandeered a nearby motorcycle and took off in pursuit, the roar of the engine cutting through the night. Victor's truck screeched to a halt outside an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. "Inside now," he shouted, helping Elena and Lily out of the truck. They ran into the factory, the sound of approaching vehicles echoing behind them. Jonas's men surrounded the factory, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Victor knew they were cornered, but he refused to give up. Spotting an old control room above the factory floor, he led Elena and Lily there, barricading the door behind them. "We're outnumbered," Elena said, her voice trembling. "What are we going to do?" Victor's jaw tightened. "We're going to hold them off until Laura gets here." Jonas's men stormed the factory, their weapons blazing. Victor fought back with whatever he could find: metal rods, broken tools, anything that could be used as a weapon. Despite his efforts, the sheer number of attackers began to overwhelm him. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, the sound of a motorcycle echoed through the factory. Laura burst onto the scene, her movements a blur, as she took down one attacker after another. Her arrival turned the tide, and together, she and Victor began to push back Jonas's men. As the battle raged on, Jonas himself entered the factory, heading straight for the control room. Elena, realizing what was happening, knew she had to act. Leaving Lily hidden behind a stack of crates, she grabbed a wrench and positioned herself near the door. When Jonas entered, Elena struck with all her might. The blow caught him off guard, and he stumbled backward, dropping his weapon. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "I don't think," Elena said, her voice steady. "I know." With Jonas incapacitated and his men either defeated or fleeing, the police finally arrived, alerted by Laura during the chaos. Jonas was taken into custody, his operation dismantled. For the first time in years, Elena and Lily were safe. Victor and Laura stood outside the factory, watching as Jonas was loaded into a police van. "It's over," Laura said, her tone a mix of relief and exhaustion. Victor nodded, though his mind was already racing with thoughts of what came next. Jonas's operation may have been stopped, but the network it was connected to was far from dismantled. As the team prepared to leave, Victor's phone buzzed. It was an email from an anonymous sender containing a single line of text. "This is only the beginning." Attached was a photo of a new target, a high-ranking politician tied to Jonas's crimes. Victor stared at the screen, his resolve hardening. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. The tension in the room was palpable, as Victor and Laura stood in his office, analyzing the mysterious email they'd received. The photo of a high-ranking politician, tied to Jonas's crimes, glared back at them from the screen, a stark reminder that their battle was far from over. Victor's mind raced as he examined the details. "This isn't just about Jonas anymore," he said, pacing the room. "If this politician is involved, then the entire network could stretch much farther than we thought." Laura nodded, her expression grim. "We need to tread carefully. If this leaks prematurely, they'll bury the evidence, and we'll lose any chance of bringing them to justice." The photo showed Senator Harold Whitaker, a prominent figure known for his anti-corruption campaigns. The irony wasn't lost on Victor. If Whitaker was complicit, it meant their fight wasn't just against criminals like Jonas. It was against the system itself. Victor and Laura began piecing together the evidence they'd collected so far. From financial records to intercepted communications, the threads all pointed to a complex web of corruption that reached the highest levels of power. They enlisted the help of Sophia, Victor's old tech colleague, who was now working full-time on the case. Sophia's expertise proved invaluable. Within hours, she managed to trace multiple offshore accounts linked to Whitaker. "This guy's been laundering money through shell companies for years," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "And guess who's been helping him?" Jonas. Victor leaned over her shoulder, scanning the screen. "This is enough to bring him down." "Not yet," Laura interjected. "We need more. A single accusation won't stick against someone as powerful as Whitaker." Meanwhile, Elena was determined to help in any way she could. Her first-hand knowledge of Jonas's operations proved to be a crucial asset. She spent hours recounting everything she knew, from the people Jonas worked with to the locations he frequented. "Elena," Victor said during one of their late-night sessions, "you've been through so much already. You don't have to keep putting yourself in danger." Elena shook her head, her resolve unwavering. "This isn't just about me anymore. If we don't stop them, they'll keep destroying lives. I won't let that happen." Her courage inspired the team, reinforcing their determination to see this through to the end. As the investigation deepened, the team discovered that Whitaker wasn't just a participant, he was a key orchestrator of the network. He used his political influence to shield people like Jonas, ensuring that their illegal activities went unnoticed. Sophia uncovered a particularly damning piece of evidence: an encrypted email chain between Whitaker and Jonas discussing the shipment of illicit goods. "This is the smoking gun," she said, her eyes lighting up. "If we can decrypt this, we'll have everything we need." But decrypting the emails was easier said than done. The encryption was military grade, requiring resources beyond what Sophia had access to. Victor knew there was only one way forward. They needed to involve law enforcement. Laura arranged a meeting with her former colleagues at the FBI. Though hesitant at first, the agents agreed to collaborate once they saw the evidence the team had collected. "This is bigger than any of us imagined," one agent admitted. "But if we're going to take Whitaker down, we need to be strategic. One wrong move, and he'll disappear." The plan was set. The FBI would use the decrypted emails to secure a warrant, while Victor and Laura worked to gather additional evidence to ensure Whitaker couldn't slip through the cracks. To apply pressure, Victor reached out to Daniel Price, a journalist known for exposing corruption. Daniel had been following the case since Jonas's arrest and was eager to break the story wide open. "We can't release everything yet," Victor cautioned. "If Whitaker finds out we're onto him, he'll destroy the evidence." Daniel agreed to hold off on publishing until the right moment. In the meantime, he began drafting an exposé that would ensure the story couldn't be buried once it came to light. As the news tightened, Whitaker began to feel the pressure. Reports of unusual financial activity and whispers of his connection to Jonas started to surface, forcing him to go on the defensive. In a televised press conference, Whitaker vehemently denied the allegations. "These are baseless attacks aimed at discrediting me and my work," he declared, his voice steady. "I have spent my career fighting for justice, and I will not let these lies derail my mission." Watching the broadcast, Victor clenched his fists. "He's good," he admitted, "but not good enough." The FBI's warrant was finally approved, and the team prepared for a coordinated raid on Whitaker's properties. It was a high-risk operation that required precise timing and execution. On the night of the raid, Victor and Laura joined the FBI agents as they stormed Whitaker's mansion. The scene was chaotic, with agents combing through every room in search of evidence. Victor's heart raced as they entered Whitaker's private office. It was there that they found the final piece of the puzzle: a ledger detailing every transaction in the network. Names, dates, amounts, it was all there. Whitaker was arrested the next morning, the news sending shockwaves through the political world. Daniel's expose hit the front pages, painting a damning picture of the senator's involvement in the network. For Victor, the victory was bittersweet. They had achieved what they set out to do, but the fight had taken its toll. The network was vast, and Whitaker's arrest was only the beginning of the battle to dismantle it entirely. As Victor and Laura reviewed the evidence one last time, a new name caught their attention, a powerful figure even higher up the chain than Whitaker. The realization hit them like a ton of bricks. The network wasn't just operating within the city. It was global. Victor stared at the name, his determination renewed. "This isn't over," he said. Not by a long shot. The city buzzed with whispers of Senator Whitaker's arrest, and Victor Sullivan knew this was the moment to strike. The evidence they had uncovered had shaken the foundations of power, but the fight was far from over. With Jonas still at large, and a shadowy figure higher in the network pulling the strings, Victor and his team had to act swiftly and decisively. The atmosphere in Victor's penthouse was tense as the team gathered to strategize. Sophia was at her computer, decrypting a fresh batch of emails, while Laura reviewed security footage from Jonas's known hideouts. "This isn't just a criminal operation. It's a full-blown conspiracy," Laura said, her voice laced with urgency. "Jonas is dangerous, but whoever's behind him is even worse. We need to expose them both." Victor nodded. "If we don't finish this now, they'll regroup and come back stronger." The plan was simple but risky. They would use Jonas's desperation against him, luring him into a trap at an upcoming charity gala. The event was a perfect stage, public enough to force his hand, but controlled enough for Victor and Laura to ensure safety. Elena, still reeling from the events of the past weeks, hesitated when Victor approached her with the idea. "You want to use me as bait?" she asked, her voice shaking. Victor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know it's a lot to ask, but Jonas trusts you, or at least he thinks he can control you. If we make it look like you're cooperating with him, he'll show up." Elena looked into Victor's eyes, searching for any hint of doubt. What she saw instead was unwavering resolve. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it. For Lily. For everyone he's hurt." The grand ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel shimmered with opulence. Guests in elegant attire mingled beneath chandeliers, oblivious to the operation unfolding around them. Victor, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, stood near the entrance, scanning the crowd for any sign of Jonas. Laura, posing as a guest, communicated through a hidden earpiece. "Security's tight. No sign of Jonas yet, but his men are definitely here." Elena arrived shortly after, her nerves barely concealed beneath a calm exterior. She wore a simple yet elegant dress, her motherly warmth making her stand out among the elite crowd. Lily, staying safely with Margaret, had drawn a picture for her mother before she left, a reminder of what was at stake. As the evening progressed, Victor spotted Jonas entering the ballroom. His imposing figure and cold demeanor made him impossible to miss. He locked eyes with Elena, a smirk spreading across his face as he approached her. Victor stayed close, pretending to be engrossed in conversation while monitoring Jonas's every move. Jonas wasted no time cornering Elena near the bar. "You've been busy," Jonas said, his voice dripping with menace. "I didn't take you for the betraying type." "I had no choice," Elena replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "But I'm here now, aren't I?" Jonas leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. "You'd better be. Otherwise, your little girl might not be so lucky next time." Victor's fists clenched at the threat, but he forced himself to stay calm. Laura's voice crackled in his earpiece. "We're ready when you are." As Jonas led Elena toward a private room, Victor and Laura moved into position. The room, rigged with hidden cameras and microphones, was set to capture Jonas confessing his crimes. Inside, Jonas began to gloat. "You think you can outsmart me? I've been doing this for years. People like me don't go to prison. We buy our way out." Elena, playing her part perfectly, responded, "Then why are you here? What do you want from me?" Jonas laughed, a chilling sound. "I want to remind you who's in charge, and I want you to deliver a message to your new friends. Stay out of my business, or they'll regret it." The door burst open, and Victor entered with Laura and a team of FBI agents. "It's over, Jonas," Victor said, his voice steady. "We have everything we need to take you down." Jonas's smug expression faltered as the agents moved in. He tried to resist, but the overwhelming evidence and sheer number of agents left him no choice. "This isn't the end," Jonas spat as he was handcuffed. "You think you've won. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Victor stepped closer, his gaze unflinching. "We'll find them too. And when we do, they'll face justice, just like you." As Jonas was led away, a wave of relief washed over Elena. Victor placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were brave tonight. Lily would be proud." The team regrouped at Victor's penthouse, where Sophia presented her latest findings. The decrypted emails pointed to a name they hadn't expected, someone deeply entrenched in the political and corporate elite. "It's not just about money," Sophia explained. "They're using these operations to influence elections, manipulate markets, and maintain power." Victor stared at the screen, the weight of the revelation settling on him. "This isn't over," he said. "We've taken down Jonas, but the real battle is just beginning." As the night wore on, Victor stepped onto the balcony, the city skyline stretching out before him. He knew their victory tonight was only a small step in a much larger fight. Elena joined him, a quiet strength in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Victor nodded, his resolve unwavering. "We're not done yet, but we'll get there." In the distance, the lights of the city twinkled like stars, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope could shine through. The dawn after Jonas's arrest brought a strange quiet to the city. For Victor Sullivan, it felt like the first true morning in weeks, free from the shadow of Jonas Miller. Yet, as he sat in his penthouse, nursing a cup of coffee, he knew that the fight was far from over. Jonas was only a piece of the puzzle. His network, stretching into politics and business, remained a looming threat. But for now, Victor allowed himself a moment to reflect on what they had achieved. The first thing Victor did that day was visit Elena and Lily. After the emotional turmoil they had endured, Victor felt a need to reassure them that they were finally safe. Elena and Lily had been moved to a safe house, a small but comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood, arranged by Laura and the FBI. When Victor arrived, Lily greeted him at the door with her usual enthusiasm. She clutched a new drawing, a colorful depiction of their makeshift family. "Look, Mr. Victor, it's us," she exclaimed, holding up the picture. Victor knelt down to examine it. The picture showed herself, Elena, and Victor standing together under a rainbow. In the corner was a small caption, written in Lily's careful, uneven letters, "Home." "It's beautiful, Lily," Victor said, his voice warm. "Just like you." Inside, Elena was preparing tea. Though she tried to mask it, the strain of the past few weeks still lingered in her expression. "I don't even know how to thank you," she said, as Victor sat down at the kitchen table. "You've done so much for us." Victor shook his head. You don't have to thank me. I didn't just do it for you. I did it because it was the right thing to do." As days turned into weeks, Victor continued to assist Elena and Lily in rebuilding their lives. He worked closely with Laura and the FBI to secure a trust fund for them, ensuring they would never have to worry about financial security again. Elena, however, was determined not to rely solely on Victor's help. She began taking steps to stand on her own 2 feet, enrolling in courses to become a counselor for victims of abuse and trafficking. Her past experiences, she explained, gave her a unique perspective and a deep empathy for those in need. Victor admired her resilience. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for," he told her during one of their conversations. "You've been through so much, but you're still standing." "It's because of Lily," Elena replied with a faint smile. "She's my reason to keep going." While Elena focused on her future, Victor turned his attention to the larger battle ahead. Inspired by his journey with Elena and Lily, he decided to establish a foundation dedicated to combating human trafficking and corruption. He named it the Beacon of Hope Foundation, a symbol of light in the darkest of times. Sophia and Laura joined him as key members of the foundation. Sophia became the head of technology and innovation, using her expertise to develop tools for tracking trafficking networks. Laura, with her law enforcement background, took charge of outreach and advocacy, building bridges between the foundation and local communities. The foundation quickly gained traction, drawing support from philanthropists and activists alike. Victor's reputation as a business mogul lent credibility to the cause, while his personal involvement inspired others to take action. One of the foundation's first major initiatives was a community event aimed at raising awareness about trafficking. Held in a large park in the heart of the city, the event featured speeches, workshops, and performances by local artists. Elena was a guest speaker. Standing on stage in front of hundreds of attendees, she shared her story with raw honesty. "For years, I felt invisible," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "I thought no one cared, that no one would help. But I was wrong. There are good people out there, people like Victor and his team, who are willing to fight for those who can't fight for themselves." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, sparking tears and applause. Lily, sitting in the front row, beamed with pride. After the event, Victor approached Elena. "You were incredible," he said. "I knew you had it in you." Elena smiled, a spark of confidence in her eyes. "I just hope I can make a difference." As the weeks passed, the bond between Victor, Elena, and Lily grew stronger. Yet Victor knew that his role in their lives was coming to an end. Elena was ready to take the reins of her own destiny, and Lily was thriving in her new school, surrounded by friends and stability. One evening, as they sat together in the safe house's cozy living room, Elena brought up the topic. "Victor," she began, her tone hesitant, "I think it's time we started living independently. You've done so much for us, but I don't want to rely on you forever." Victor's heart ached at the thought of saying goodbye, but he knew she was right. "You've come so far, Elena," he said. "I'm proud of you, and I'll always be here if you need me." Lily, overhearing the conversation, ran to Victor and hugged him tightly. "You're not leaving forever, are you?" she asked, her voice quivering. Victor knelt down to her level. "Never, Lily. I'll always be just a phone call away." The chapter ended with a quiet but powerful moment. On the last day Victor visited the safe house, Lily handed him another drawing, a picture of a lighthouse shining its beam over a stormy sea. "This is you," she said simply. "You're our light." Victor held the drawing close, his eyes misty. "Thank you, Lily. That means more to me than you'll ever know." As he drove away that evening, Victor felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. He had found his purpose, not in wealth or success, but in making a difference in the lives of others. Back at his penthouse, Victor received a call from Sophia. Her voice was urgent. "Victor, I've found something. It's about the mastermind behind Jonas's network." Victor's jaw tightened. The battle wasn't over yet. "Send me the details," he said. "We're not done fighting." The quiet resolve in Victor Sullivan's heart burned brighter than ever as he sat in the Beacon of Hope Foundation's newly completed headquarters. The modern, sleek building stood in stark contrast to the darkness it sought to fight against. For Victor, the foundation symbolized more than a mission. It was a promise to himself, to Elena and Lily, and to all the unseen victims still waiting for someone to notice their pain. The success of the Foundation's first initiatives was far-reaching. Stories of rescued families and survivors finding new beginnings began to spread, igniting hope in communities once gripped by despair. Elena, now a dedicated counselor working with the Foundation, was one of those stories. Her journey from victim to advocate had inspired countless others. She became a spokesperson for the Foundation, appearing at events and on media platforms to share her experiences. Every time she stepped on stage, she carried Lily's faith and Victor's support with her, turning her pain into purpose. Lily thrived in her new environment. She joined a local art program funded by the Foundation, her natural talent blossoming under the guidance of skilled mentors. One day, she proudly presented Victor with a painting she had completed, a vibrant depiction of a lighthouse guiding a small boat through a stormy sea. "This is for you," she said with a shy smile, "because you were our lighthouse." Victor placed the painting in his office, where it served as a daily reminder of why he fought so hard. The Foundation hosted its first major gala, an event designed to raise awareness and funds for the fight against trafficking and corruption. The room was filled with business leaders, politicians, activists, and survivors who had come together to support the cause. Among them was Sophia Lee, who had become a central figure in the Foundation's tech-driven approach to dismantling trafficking networks. Sophia unveiled an innovative software called Illuminate, designed to track and disrupt trafficking operations by analyzing digital patterns. "This isn't just a tool," she explained to the captivated audience. "It's a weapon in the fight against exploitation." The crowd erupted into applause, and Victor couldn't hide his pride. Sophia's brilliance and dedication had turned a dream into reality. Elena took the stage next. Her speech was raw and heartfelt, painting a vivid picture of her struggles and triumphs. "I used to think no one cared," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I was wrong. There are people who care. People like Victor, Sophia, and all of you in this room. Together, we can shine a light into the darkest places." Her words brought the audience to their feet, and Victor felt a surge of hope. The gala was more than a fundraiser. It was proof that change was possible. Despite the progress they had made, the shadow of Jonas Miller's network still loomed. Although Jonas was behind bars, his reach extended far beyond his prison cell. Victor and Laura continued to work tirelessly, uncovering connections to influential figures who had enabled Jonas's crimes. One name kept resurfacing, a prominent politician known for his public philanthropy, but linked to suspicious offshore accounts. Victor knew exposing this individual would be dangerous, but he also knew it was necessary. "We can't stop now," he told Laura during a late-night strategy session. "If we don't take this fight to the top, everything we've done will be for nothing." Laura nodded, her determination matching his own. "We'll get him. We just have to be smart about it." Amid the chaos, Victor found time to celebrate a personal milestone, his birthday. Elena and Lily organized a small surprise party for him at the safe house, inviting only a handful of close friends, including Sophia and Laura. As Victor entered the room, he was greeted by the sight of a homemade cake, decorated with Lily's careful handwriting, "Happy birthday to our hero." The evening was filled with laughter and warmth, a rare moment of peace in their turbulent lives. For Victor, it was a reminder of what he was fighting for, not just justice, but the simple, precious joys of life. When the party wound down, Lily approached Victor with a small, wrapped gift. Inside was a framed photo of the three of them, taken during one of their outings to the park. "Your family now," Lily said softly, hugging him. Victor's heart swelled with emotion. In that moment, he realized that his life's greatest achievement wasn't his wealth or success. It was the impact he had made on the lives of others. As the foundation gained momentum, Victor and his team prepared for their most ambitious project yet, a nationwide campaign to combat trafficking and corruption. The campaign, titled Light the Way, aimed to empower local communities to take action and provide resources for survivors. Victor personally traveled to cities across the country, meeting with activists, law enforcement, and survivors. Each story he heard fueled his resolve, and each life he touched reinforced his belief in the power of collective action. One particularly moving encounter was with a young woman named Maria St., who had escaped a trafficking ring with the help of the foundation. "You saved me," she told Victor, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know where I'd be without you." Victor shook his head. "You saved yourself," he replied. "We just gave you the tools." The chapter ended with Victor standing on the steps of the Foundation's headquarters, watching the sunrise. Beside him stood Elena, Lily, Sophia, and Laura, a team forged through adversity and united by purpose. "Do you think we've done enough?" Elena asked quietly. Victor looked at her, then at Lily, who was chasing bubbles in the morning light. "Not yet," he said, "but we're just getting started." As Victor returned to his office, he found an envelope waiting for him. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a chilling message. "You think you've won, but the real fight has just begun." Victor clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He picked up his phone and dialed Sophia. "It's time to take this to the next level," he said. Victor's journey reminds us all of the power of one act of kindness and the ripple effects it can create. But what would you have done in his place? Would you have taken that leap of faith to help a stranger or walked away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. The music swells gently, inviting viewers to stay engaged. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. There's so much more to uncover in the next chapter of this powerful story. Together, let's shine a light on the struggles and triumphs that connect us all. We'll see you next time. The screen lingers for a moment, showing the channel's logo and a glowing subscribe button, before gently fading out.